Get started, and I'd like to welcome you to our monthly webinar series. My name is Judy Browse, and I'm the Executive Director of NAAE, and I'm so happy that you could all join us. And I'm hoping we have a lot of repeaters from yesterday, because today is part 2 of why bad presentations happen to good causes. But if you were not here yesterday, it is recorded and you can hear that, and this part will stand on its own and be fantastic as well. And we're so excited to have Andy Goodman with us again from the Goodman Center. But we wanted to just see if you wouldn't mind filling out a quick poll that Kristen is going to send out, and let us know if you were here for yesterday, because if everybody was, we can skip some of the intro slides. And by me saying that, now everyone will say they were there yesterday, but go ahead and take the poll. We'd love to see if you were here yesterday. So Kristen?
Votes are coming in. Judy, we've got about 37 out of 55. They're coming in quick. Looks like we do have a few that weren't here yesterday, though.
Okay. But it's nice to see so many people coming back. So Andy, you had an impact already. So thanks, everybody. What we will do is go very quickly through these intro slides. I do want to, again, thank our affiliate co-hosts for being a part of this series. Our affiliates are our strongest asset, and if you're not a member of your state affiliate, I really hope you will consider joining. Together, we are all trying to advance environmental literacy and civic engagement. And as many of you know, we have a monthly webinar series that's usually on the 4th Tuesday of every month, with flexibility like this time, because we had a two-parter yesterday and today, because we have so much good info we want to tell you about. And we are always looking for great ideas. The topics that we had last year and this year are coming from you in terms of what is of interest to you. And we're trying to bring new ideas to the field. So keep letting us know what you think is important, and we will keep trying to find the best topics and the best speakers so that we can make these webinars as good as possible. And so just 2 seconds on Zoom, and then I'll introduce Andy, and Andy will again take us through some tips on how to give better presentations for all of us. And then we'll have some time for questions and discussion, closing thoughts from Andy, and closing thoughts from NAAE. So hope that sounds okay to everyone, and just want to emphasize that the way to send us questions is through the chat box. And if you have questions throughout, Kristen and I will keep track of those, and when Andy stops, we'll make sure those questions get answered, as well as anything else that he wants to talk about on the breaks in response to the questions. So please feel free to interact with us on the chat box throughout. We'd love it, including any comments or thoughts you have or other resources you know about that would help others. That would be fantastic. So now I would like to introduce Andy. For those of you who were not here yesterday, I want to tell you about why we're so excited Andy's here. Many years ago, I was part of a conference where Andy gave a presentation on how to give a presentation, and we all had to get up and try and do presentations. He was fantastic, and from then on, I've been hooked on everything Andy does, including the work he's done on storytelling. He gave a wonderful keynote at our conference in San Diego. He's a fantastic communicator, really cares about helping nonprofits like NAAE succeed. And he thinks that all of us can do a better job because we have important things to say to people. And when we give presentations, he wants to make sure they're the best they can be. He's the director of the Goodman Center. He's a well-known author, speaker, and consultant working in public interest communications. He's a pro on storytelling, how to give great presentations, and conducting workshops on strategic communications. And this webinar, as we mentioned yesterday, is based on his book called Why Bad Presentations Happen to Good People, and everyone will get a copy of that. And he's spoken everywhere from Harvard's Kennedy School of Government to the Graduate School of Business at Stanford, and he'll be here in DC for a keynote next week. So he's all about good causes and has helped so many of us do better at what we do. So lots more I could say about everything Andy has done, but I want to turn it over to Andy so you can learn from the pro. And again, let's give him a very warm welcome. So Andy, take it away.
Thanks, Judy. Let me seize control of the screen, as we say here. Put my screen up there. Hold on one sec. There. So welcome back to part 2 of why bad presentations happen to good causes. For those of you who were not with us yesterday, a quick review. Yesterday, we built this schematic, which represents a good presentation. Probably looks like a lot of letters and numbers and symbols to you, but basically the idea here is that it's most productive if you think of your presentation not as your presentation, but as the audience's journey from where you are when you get them at point A, when they walk in the room, and where you want them to be at point B when they leave. If you think about it as their journey, then you're going to really focus it on the audience and what they need to learn. And that means breaking it down into 1, 2, 3, or 4 major points that you want to make along the way to get them from A to B. A strong beginning, a strong ending, and interaction throughout. And if you had an hour, we said this is how you parse it out. One more thing I want to add to this notion of structure. I want to share something I learned from Al Gore when I had a chance to work with him. After Al Gore did An Inconvenient Truth, which I'm guessing a lot of you saw, he made a promise. He said, look, An Inconvenient Truth is a slideshow. It's a slideshow I've been giving for years. We turned it into a movie, but we'd still like to give this presentation around the country. So he made an offer. He said, if you'll come down to Nashville and spend 3 or 4 days with us, we'll train you in how to give this presentation. And the promise you have to make back to us is that you will take the presentation back to your community and give it at least 10 times. So 1,000 people signed up for this training on the internet, and they came down to Nashville in waves of 200. But for a 6-month stretch between 2006 and 2007, I worked on his faculty there, training people on how to give this presentation. And like I said, 1,000 people came, and then they went back. So let 10,000 presentations bloom. It was really a wonderful experience. And he's still doing it through the Climate Project, still training people every month. But working side by side with him, I got to listen to the former vice president talk about his sort of theory of presenting. And he had one interesting concept that I wanted to share with you at the top. And it was the notion that when you get up to present, you have 3 budgets as a presenter. And you have to know what they are and respect them if you're going to do a good job. The first budget is time. He said, if someone gives you 30 minutes, you get up there and you do 30 minutes, not less, not more. You stay within the time prescribed. It's common sense, it's common decency. Don't need to belabor the point. The second budget you have to work with, he calls complexity. And the idea here is that you have to know that your audience can only absorb a certain amount of complexity in any one sitting. Even if you got a room full of PhDs, there's just so much you can fill them up with in any one sitting. And he says, if you bust that budget, you lose them. And Gore was very candid. He said that in the earliest iterations of the Inconvenient Truth slideshow, when he was first taking it out on the road and trying it out, he put in so much science, so much data, to make the case for global warming, that he said, I have to admit, I busted the complexity budget. I would be halfway through my presentation looking out at the audience, and I could see the eyes glazing over. They were full, they were done. So pay attention to the complexity budget. And the third budget, and this one I found most interesting, is what he calls the hope budget. And the idea there is that if you're going to have a presentation that describes a problem, only to eventually get around to the solution, he says you don't want to spend so much time on the problem and make it so grim and scary that you bust the hope budget, so that by the time you get to the solution, the people in the audience are thinking, oh no, runaway train, we're all going to die. And again, he was candid. He said that he worked so hard to get people, concerned about global warming, that when he got to the solutions piece, the what you could do piece, he often saw that people had kind of checked out, were shaking their heads, and was like, nope, this is not solvable. So 3 budgets to be aware of as you plan your presentations. And I think this is just generally good stuff for you to work with. So yesterday, we talked about what the audience told us. We talked about the structure of good presentations. Today, I really want to focus on PowerPoint. And again, I am not recommending it. I'm not insisting you use it, but it does tend to be the language that presenters speak in. And I'm wagering that while I don't have a poll ready for you, most of you probably use PowerPoint if you get up and present slides. So how do you make PowerPoint your friend and not your enemy? Well, I know that there's a lot of negative talk about PowerPoint. There are a lot of PowerPoint haters out there, probably none more prominent than Edward Tufte, former professor at Yale University and one of the deans of information design. If you've never read any of Tufte's books, I highly recommend. I mean, this guy is the expert when it comes to presenting information in an interesting, compelling way. He hates PowerPoint. I'll give you here's a sample of a Tufte quote. Take a moment to read that for yourselves. And that's classic Tufte there. Audiences endure a relentless sequentiality, one damn slide after another. I can just picture him saying it. Now that you've read this and now that you're familiar with Tufte, if you hadn't been before, this cartoon, which has been circulating on the internet, will have more meaning for you. I'm pretty sure it's true. So let's talk about PowerPoint and how you can make it your friend and not your enemy. And I want to give you 7 principles, which I think if you follow them, will make it your friend. And we'll stop after every couple to just take some questions so you don't have to wait right till the end. So here's number 1. You got to make a choice. There's this myth out there that I can prepare my PowerPoint slides and then I'll also print them out and I have my handouts, and that they'll work for both viewing and for handouts. And let me tell you something that is just not true. These are some actual slides that I saw up on the screen. Just imagine that up on a screen in a darkened room. Look at the amount of text on that slide. This is from the U.S. Department of Energy, by the way, our friends there. All the data. Here's another one. New Hampshire Division of Public Health Services. I mean, just absolutely unreadable in the room. Now, I'm not saying that you can't work with this amount of data. You can't have presentations that have this amount of information, but this does you no good up on the screen. Here's another example. This is from the Annie Casey Foundation. Here's a slide. I actually worked with this presenter, and I said, are you covering all this information? Are you going to be talking about all this when you present the slide? And she said, no, actually, it was this right here, this bar that I've just circled. She said, that's really the key piece of information. Now, if you put this up on a screen in a darkened room and you put a bar around it to call attention, well, at least you know what you're focusing on, but it's still pretty hard to read. So I said, probably a better way to redesign the slide is make the slide look like this. Highlight the section that you really want, and then they can have a handout, a copy of the original, so that look at the handout on the left. There's all the information in its original form, but the slide is telling you what to look at and making it big enough that you can actually see it. The notion is that the slide and the handout working together to say, here's all the information and here's what's important. Another example. Imagine this up on the screen, trying to read all of that. You're just going to be, no way. Again, I asked the presenter, what's the important portion here? And I believe he said it was this portion right down there. So I said, well, great. Why don't you blow it up like this? And once again, they can have the handout in their hands with all the original information as you designed it, but the slide is telling them this is the important stuff to look at. But you got to make a decision. People can have the handouts to walk away with, but the slides have got to help them see the information. Whenever a presenter says, I know you can't read this, you have to shout back, then what's it doing up there? We're going to have a revolution here. I'm going to be creating a riot. All right, second. Generally with PowerPoint, you want to emphasize the images over the text. When I see presentations like this is a bunch of slides from a presentation. It just makes me sad. I mean, imagine having to sit in a room and look at that up on the screen. Why not just print it out and give people the handouts and let them walk away? What's the point of being there? I think a good way to think about PowerPoint is kind of the way the screens work when you see an anchor on TV, like on CNN, where over their shoulder is an image with a few words and just a picture to sort of give you a sense of here's what we're talking about, and then the attention gets focused on the real human being in the front of the room. When Al Gore did the Inconvenient Truth slideshow, which I hope some of you saw in person, but I also hope you saw in the movie if you didn't, a lot of his slides were just this, just images. You want to talk about the fragility of our planet? Showing an Earthrise from the surface of the moon, that pale blue dot hanging in black inky space, that's got its own power. You want to talk about how the snows of Kilimanjaro are disappearing because of global warming. You could certainly have a bar graph that shows the numbers going down every year. But look at this image and how it juxtaposes with our own sort of universal memory of our own unconscious memory of what Kilimanjaro should look like. When he wanted to talk about the increase in extreme weather due to a heated atmosphere, when he wanted to do that, look at what you have here. You have a picture it's a still picture, but it has its own energy. Where, when, how many, and that's as much information as you have on the screen. When he wanted to talk about how ice floes are melting and how polar bears have to swim further and further just to find a place to stand. Look at that picture. Doesn't that say it all? You can practically hear the polar bear on the left saying, "Oh, Al Gore, save us." So you want to emphasize the visuals. That's what people will look at. Here's another slide from the Department of Energy. Basically this slide wants you to know that there's 4 technology areas, but the pictures are very small, hard to see, and a whole bunch of text on the screen, so not clearly conveying this as well as it could. I think this is better. The other information you can fill in. Show the pictures, say the words. Here's another example. This is from the Conrad Hilton Foundation. This is a presentation about early childhood development, as you can see, but not a child to be seen in this version. Same information, but with more of a human touch. Here's another example. And this is something else. This is particularly true of webinars. You want to keep the images moving. You don't want to have people just staring at one thing for too long. People get bored easily, particularly in webinars like this, where this is all you can see. You can't see me. So what you want to do is keep it moving. So if you've got 5 things to talk about and you have this one slide and you're going through 5 bullet points, not that interesting. But if you say, first I want to tell you about flu shots, and you provide some information about that. But then as you move along, you build the slide in front of people with new images to keep it interesting, keep it moving, keep it visual, same information. And believe me, nobody's charging you per slide here. You can have 5 slides where you had 1. It's more interesting for the audience. Now, here is a standard garden variety, public interest slide. This is from the Starlight Starbright Foundation. They run programs that make long hospital stays more bearable for kids. It's a good thing. And what they want to convey in this slide is that they have 4 different programs. And you see them there: Great Escapes, Hospital Happenings, Technology, Educational Program. But this is way too much information for a slide. This is essentially a document. This is a handout that you can take away, that you should take away and walk away with. Has all the information. Too much to consume visually. This is better. At least here, the 4 programs jump out. And there's a few words of explanation if the title of the program isn't self-evident what they do. But even this is still too much. This is what the designer Nancy Duarte refers to as teleprompter. It's a slide that's helping the speaker know what to say. This is best. Here's a slide that has a nice big image, so you get a little bit of emotional content. You get a chance of seeing these children working with these programs. And the presenter can say, look, we have 4 programs at the Starlight Starbright Foundation. We have Great Escapes, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. Hospital Happenings, and I'll tell you about that, etc., etc. Look, let's face it. The most the audience is going to take away from this part of the presentation is, you've got 4 programs. If I want more details, I can always get a handout. But this is a slide that really works for the audience. Now, what you've just seen here is a progression, and we see this continuum a lot in the nonprofit world. On the left, like I said, that's a document. That's a print that out, give it to people, that's what they can walk away with. In the middle, it's a step in the right direction, but that's still what Nancy Duarte calls teleprompter. It's really there to remind the speaker what to say, and frankly, the speaker should know what she or he is going to say. On the far right, that's a presentation slide. That works for the audience. All right, tip number 3. Design outside the white box. What do we mean by the white box? Here's a white box. This is a slide from CEO, the Center for Employment Opportunities, based in New York. Now, in PowerPoint, if you don't already have a template, PowerPoint will default to this white background, the so-called white box, and you'll fill it with your information, as they've done here. Headline, 3 bullet points, and a couple of postage stamp sized pictures, because clearly someone said to them, use pictures on your slides. Now, when you see this in a darkened room, the white box becomes part of the information that you take in. So let's redesign. Let's go to a black background. Let's have one nice big picture and then this kind of text, like you see here, with one accent color to make the numbers jump out. You see now how there's no white box anymore. There's no border trapping all the information. All of this stands by itself, the eye going to the picture first because it's the only thing up on the screen, and then to the text, which stands out very nicely against the black background. I highly recommend this if you don't already have a template. Black backgrounds really take advantage of the way in which PowerPoint is projected in a room. And you've got some pretty good models using it. When he was alive, Steve Jobs used black backgrounds in all his presentations. Al Gore used black backgrounds in his work in The Inconvenient Truth. The only objection I've ever heard to this, someone said, well, if I print out all those slides, it's going to use a lot of ink. To which I would reply, you're not printing out the slides. This is strictly for projection. I think this is a good place to stop and to take some questions. So let me throw it to Judy. Judy, I think you've been keeping an eye on the chat box. Any questions before we go on to our next item?
Yes, so somebody had asked the best color for print and background. I think you answered that. I just throw in, does it help to mix them up, or do you like something where it's a very similar format throughout the entire presentation?
I think it's good to have to be consistent. You want to have presentations that look like they come from the same organization, and there's some design rules to them. We're going to talk about that a little later on when we talk about templates. But I am a believer in design consistency. And if you choose black, then you go with black. Anything else at this point, Judy?
The only other thing was, where do you get your images? Somebody had asked where I got my images, and I'm not going to tell. No, where do you get your images, Andy? And
sure.
How do you do that?
There are some places you can get them. If you go to Flickr, there's a section of Flickr called the Creative Commons, where people have posted images which you can download for free. And then, of course, you can search on the internet through Google. There are lots of places where you can buy images low cost and for very few dollars. But I think the Creative Commons is one of my favorite sources for free images.
Thanks, Andy.
All right.
And the only thing I would add are the cartoons that I use. I do buy, and I go to Cartoon Stock.
Absolutely. All right, let's move on to point number 4, which is about animation. And as you see here, I think animation serves 2 purposes. It can control the pace at which you dole out information and keep people focused where you want them focused. It can also convey a deeper level of meaning beyond what the static images and text can convey. The problem with animation is that with PowerPoint and Keynote, I think PowerPoint gives you 50 different ways to animate text and objects on a screen. And you've probably all seen the presentation that uses all 50, right? It's just, most of it's just eye candy. Frequently I'll ask people, why did you use that effect over there? And the response will be, oh, it looked cool. like, great, that's really good. That's good. No. 2 reasons for animation: control the flow of information, convey meaning. Let me show you what I mean. Here's a slide from a foundation in Cleveland that was working on citing affordable housing. And in their campaign, they use the term fresh start as language to say that people deserve this a fresh start with new housing. Now, if you put this slide up on the screen as you see it now, the audience has all the information and will start to take it all in. And let's say that you're focused on the top 2 sets of bars there, where it says more people will get a fresh start, 76%, 17%. You want to explain what that means. Well, while you're explaining, trust me, they're looking at the rest of the chart because it's there to be seen. And then when you get to the rest of the chart, you're kind of behind them and catching up, and now they're checking their email. With animation, you can build the chart in front of them gradually so that as you talk about the first 2 bars, that's all they've got to work with. And then you can gradually add and build as you go along, keeping them focused where you want them focused so that they're not watching it, looking at their own, getting ahead of you, and then figuring it's time to check my email. The way I like to say this is 2 words: always build. When you have a complex chart like this in front of people, if you can build it in front of them, it makes it more interesting and keeps them focused. Here's a very similar example. This is from the city of Aspen. I had a chance to work with them. As you can see here, they're talking about greenhouse gases as generated by different sectors. They put this up on the screen. It's all there: housing, business, automotive, planes, trucks, or landfill, you see there. Now, what would be more interesting? How about this? We define the sectors, but then as they talk about each one, they can talk about residential energy, and they can explain what those numbers mean. Then commercial energy from businesses, vehicles and automotive, airport and travel, and landfill. Animation to control the flow of information. And in terms of conveying meaning, here's a slide from the Union of Concerned Scientists about global warming and how it's transforming the topography. And what they're showing here is a glacial plain in the Andes Mountains in 1928, and that same area, nearly 80 years later, now it's a lake. That's a pretty dramatic difference, wouldn't you say? But it's not presented as dramatically as PowerPoint would allow. So let's redesign. Let's go to a black background so that we just see the image. And now we've tucked the color picture behind the black and white picture, so we can say, look, here's what it looked like in 1928, and then with an effect, with a dissolve, ooh, look at that. It's like 80 years just passed in front of your eyes. You know, the nice thing about dissolves is that, you know, by watching TV and movies for years, we're kind of acculturated to understand that a dissolve means the passage of time. So by simply putting the color picture behind the black and white picture, we get the sense of 80 years passing, almost like the ice is melting in front of our eyes. Another example. The Solar Electric Light Fund is helping bring electricity to people who are off the grid, and that's over 2 billion people around the globe. It's really noble, heroic work. They had a chance to go make a presentation at Google to try and generate some funds. So as we know, there's a lot of money there at Google. This was a big, high-pressure presentation. They wanted a strong ending, a hair up on the back of your neck ending. So we sat down with them. We said, let's see what kind of images you have to work with. What do you got that might get people inspired? This is one of the images they showed us. They're building a solar array. I believe this was in Rwanda. Now look at that image. Does that remind you of anything from history? I'll bet it does. It reminded us of this, right? Raising the flag in Iwo Jima. So what we said to them was, imagine that you haven't seen either of these. When you get to the end of your presentation, say that in the 1940s, this was the iconic image of people trying to change the destiny of this planet. And in the year 2014, when they made the presentation, we believe this is that image. And in that dissolve, you have this wonderful feeling of from then to now. And I got to tell you, they got a standing ovation in the room. And one more image that I like a lot. Yesterday, we talked about title slides. This is a title slide for a presentation. It was on a loop, and it kept doing this. That's not bad. It's a good use of animation. Fifth, prioritizing elements by importance and unifying to avoid clutter. This is just sort of basic graphic design. Whether we're talking about a web page, a print page, or a PowerPoint slide, there are certain rules you need to be aware of. Here's a slide from our friends at the Environmental Defense Fund. This was from a few years ago, back when they were temporarily known as Environmental Defense, by the way. They're talking about the Western Sierra mountain range. You see that, about the fact it was clear cut, and that's bad because of those three reasons you see in bullet points. But here's the problem with this slide. First of all, you've got this template with the blue bars at the top and bottom, that sort of bluish gray background. There's a big lowercase letter E, which was at the time their logo in the background. But all the text is the same size and weight and color. It's not really telling you how to take in the information. And the single most important thing on the slide, the picture, has less than 25% of the available real estate. So let's redesign. Now the picture is full screen. And through animation, we can bring in the information. Where are we? When are we? And why is it a bad thing? Because of this, says the presenter, and this, and this. We're using the same colors, the same fonts that Environmental Defense Fund uses, but now the slide is helping you take in the information. Here's another example. This is from the Center for Global Development. You're seeing their slide within mine. The title of the slide is, as you see, the 2 errors. And beneath the black line are the 2 errors. What would you say are the 2 errors? Look at those 4 lines of text. Can you tell? You're probably guessing, because you've got 4 lines of text, all the same color. 2 are italicized, 2 aren't, but they're the same weight, the same font size. I mean, they're not telling you. They're not using design to help you know what's going on here. So let's redesign. Now you realize that the errors are treatment, access, and quality, and IT and access. By making those things jump out, we see those first. And by grouping the information, we see what goes with what. So when you design your slide, you have to think about things like proximity. Things that are close together, we assume are related. Color, brighter colors, more contrast, things that stand out, grab our attention. And the same thing with size. All of these things send messages to your audience. Look here first, look here second. This is more important than this. If you don't pay attention to that, you're not helping it. From the same organization. Here's a slide about the geographic distribution of failed and failing states economically around the globe. But look at this slide. What's the most important thing on this slide? The map of the Earth, right? But it's less than 25% of the available territory on the slide. The legend is almost as big as the entire world. And then you've got these other elements. You see those little green and blue semicircles on the left there, what I like to affectionately refer to as the butt cheeks poking into the slide. That's a template. That serves no purpose. It's just design. So let's redesign. Same information, but now the world is as big as it'll go, and the legend is still readable. I would still take issue with the color choices. The orange and the red are a little too close. But just look at that difference from that to that. Now, invariably, this leads to a discussion of something that Judy alluded to earlier, and that's templates. People will look at these slides and say, you know what, we need to redesign our template. And I'm generally not in favor of that. I refer to templates as templates of doom. because they tend to doom you to use less than the available area of the slide and to just plop things into open spaces and not really think about design. I'll show you a couple examples. OJC, on-the-job consulting. On this slide, they want to talk about this web page. You see it in the lower right-hand corner where it says Office of Volunteer Programs, and these 7 services that are available on the page. But look at the way the slide's designed. Because of the template, you have that blue field on the left that's holding the logo, the green field on the bottom that's holding the slogan, and all of that consuming space that cannot be touched. Only the white space is available. And the most important thing, the web page, is tiny. So first of all, let's recognize you don't need your logo on every single slide. Okay? Can we just get over that? This is not satellite television, right? It's not like someone can suddenly change the channel and needs to see a logo on the bottom to know where they are. It's just you up there. If they don't know who you are and where you're from after 4 or 5 slides, you got a bigger problem than design. So let's lose the logo. And if your colors are blue and green, that's fine. We can have certain colors that identify the organization, but let's put the emphasis where it belongs. So let's redesign. Now the blue field is holding the title of the slide, Services. The green field is there as an accent color, but you've really opened up the slide, and now the most important thing, the web page, is crystal clear along with the 7 services. Again, before and after. Another example. On this slide, the important thing is the picture and all these justices, which, unless you've got your nose right up against the screen right now, you may not even see that under each justice is their name and a thumb up or a thumb down or a question mark as to how they're going to vote. And they don't even use the white field to its fullest to show that. And so what do you got? You've got this black tab design. You've got these 4 icons, which I think have been borrowed from the Jetsons, as far as I can tell. If orange and black are your colors, fine. Now you can still go with your tab design. That's fine. But now you can see the picture clearly. Before, after. Here's a slide from the Colorado Trust. Again, we're dealing with a template. The colors at the top, the purple, the blue on the left, the green on the bottom, the orange on the right. That's on every slide, and it's consuming space, as is the logo. Look at how much space they give up on every slide. See the shaded areas coming in now? You're just losing all that space on every slide. Now, I want to show you 4 slides in a row. Don't bother to read all the information, but just sort of take in the look and feel of these slides. This is going to sum up what we're going to talk about with templates. This is from iPass. Slide number 1. Same organization, slide number 2. Same organization, slide number 3. And same organization, slide number 4. Now, very different look and feel for all 4 slides, but here's the really troubling aspect. All 4 of these slides, they're not only from the same organization, they're from the same presentation. Clearly, the presenter had gone to different people in the organization and said, hey, can I borrow your slides? Let me borrow your slides. And they basically jammed them together into one presentation. And this is a nightmare for the audience, because every time you change colors in a background, change fonts, change basic design look, the audience is trying to make sense of it. Are we in a different chapter? Have we moved to a different country, a different methodology? Why is it different? There's no reason here. It's just laziness pulling this together. So while I'm not in favor of templates, I am in favor of consistency, a certain set of design rules about our presentations. We will use these colors. We will use this font. We will follow these principles. But we will not simply have a template where it's pop in, the information in these blank spaces. Six, the design of your entire presentation can convey substance and information beyond just what any individual slide is giving you. Let me show you two examples of this. Encore is an organization that's helping people find, as you see there, find work that matters in the second half of life. These are people who are hitting retirement age, and rather than just kicking back, it's a chance for them to give back. This is the agenda slide for the presentation, and it lays out 4 parts. Part 1, how the nature of work has changed over time. You know, we used to just work till we dropped. Then we invented this thing called retirement. And now there's different ways of approaching retirement. So we have to note that the way we approach work has changed. We've changed. We're living longer. We're better educated. We have more money at our disposal. There's now this choice that beckons, this thing called the Encore career, where you can now do something close to your heart that gives back to the world. And it's the hope of this organization that they can get enough people to do that, that they launch what they call the Encore movement. So that's the agenda. Those are the 4 tent posts of that presentation. As you move through the presentation, the slides reflect this. And let me just sort of jump to the back of the presentation. You see that slide? The 3 grayed out tabs at the top tell you where you've already been. The 4th one tells you where you are. The white area still is available. And then you have 1 image and 1 fact to talk about. But here's where the design of the presentation itself is helping you know where you've been, where you are, where you're going. In a similar vein, Partnership for Climate Action. This is a long presentation. This is a good solid hour. They've got 6 different things they're going to talk about. You see the agenda right there. They're moving through a lot of territory. As you move through the presentation, let me jump somewhere into the middle and take a look at this slide. You see that the agenda topics are now on the left there, almost like navigation on a website, telling you that you're in part 2. The right side of the slide is now wide open, and you see the title of what they're talking about, a little visual, and some more information. But the presentation itself is telling you where you are. And then there are the little miracles. And after this, we'll take a break and take some questions. There are 2 things that you can do as a presenter that a lot of people just don't seem to know. I guess it's because there's no manuals anymore, and this is now passed down through oral tradition. So let me give you 2 tips that you may not know about. The first miracle is what I call the miracle of the B key. Does anybody know the miracle of the B key? I'm just curious. When you are presenting, when you're in presenter mode, and you hit the B key, something happens. Do you know what it is? You hit the B key and the entire screen goes black. Why is that important? Well, let's say you're presenting. If you've had the experience I've had, you know that after a while, people are looking at the screen and they stop looking at you, and you get what we call the PowerPoint trance. They're just looking at the screen. And every once in a while, you kind of need to break that trance and connect, have eye contact with your audience. Ask them a question. Are you following me? Is everybody clear, etc.? You hit the B key, and the screen goes black, and trust me, every eye in the room will swing to you. It's like, nothing up there, might as well look at her. Hit the B key again, the image comes right back, and all eyes go back to the screen. So it's just a great way, the B key, of reconnecting with your audience, getting their attention, and letting them know that there is, in fact, a human being at the front of the room. The other nice little trick is the fact that you can go to any slide at any time. I wonder if you know that. Any slide at any time. Here's how it works. Hopefully I'll do this right. Let's say you're in your presentation and we happen to be at slide number 170. Now that may seem like a lot, but believe it or not, we have that many slides. If I'm in the room with you in a live presentation and suddenly someone's phone starts ringing. It's annoying. I don't want to call it out, but I can just walk over to my keyboard and I can hit some keys and this will appear on the screen. I won't even say anything. It just pops up on the screen. And I hit some keys again. I'm right back where I was. What did I do? Well, in the back of my presentation, sitting in the position of slide number 210, was that slide that says your phone is ringing. So I went to my keyboard and I hit 210 and hit enter, and the presentation jumps to slide 210. Looks like this. Here we are at slide 170. Someone's phone starts ringing. I hit 210, enter. I jump to that slide number, and when I'm done embarrassing the person, I hit 170, enter, and I go right back to where I was. Now you might say, well, that's good for you, Andy. You don't care about embarrassing people. You're so rude. But that's not the only reason to do it. As a friend of mine said, they call the slides that you tuck in the back of the deck pocket slides. And the idea here is that you might want to bring some slides with you that you're not sure you're going to use. So you have them in your back pocket, so to speak. You tuck them in the back of your deck and you number them. And then, depending on how the presentation goes, you can pull those slides in seamlessly, just like I did, without anybody knowing it. This is really helpful if you're going to a conference. And let's say, you remember I said yesterday that it's important to know your audience. Well, let's say you're going to a conference and you weren't able to do any research on your audience. You don't know if that room is full of beginners, intermediates, or experts. Well, as they come into the room, you engage some people in conversation. You find out, holy smokes, it's a room full of experts. And I've got this beginner section and this intermediate section. Well, with this technique, you can just jump over all of that and get right to the expert section because you've got the right slides tucked in your back pocket. So those are the 7 techniques. Let me stop there and say to Judy, let's stop again to questions. And then I've got, as I said yesterday, after the questions, a closing thought I'd like to share with you.
So Andy, we have a lot of questions, so we'll do what we can, and then maybe we can answer them and put them on ePro at the end. So first one, any advice for presenting to kids and teens that's different than adults?
You know, it's the same advice. You know, the advice is always know your audience, and if your audience is kids and teens, then you have to customize the material to them. You know, obviously kids have a shorter attention span. They don't have the depth of learning that we have. You just have to pitch the audience to the expectations, the education, the learning style of the audience. We could spend an entire day talking about how you do a presentation for children or how you do it for teenagers. Unfortunately, we don't have time, but the general rule holds. You find out who your audience is and you shape the presentation to their needs. I wish we had more time just to talk about kids and teens, but
we'll have to bring you back, Andy. Okay, yeah. Another question. Some of the presentations people do are about social skills, management, things that don't have cute animals and great images. What's your advice on how to liven up those kinds of presentations that don't have great graphics potentially?
Well, that's a good question. Generally, it's been my experience that we can usually find some graphic representation for what we're talking about. But if there are no great graphics, then that's when I would sort of turn off the screen and just turn it into an interpersonal experience. If there aren't great graphics, you still text, bullet points, all that stuff. It's still not going to work. So either find a representative graphic or turn the screen off and do it another way.
So Andy, how do you feel about bullet points? Everyone has said the deadly bullet points. You said a little bit about lists coming in order, animated, but any thoughts?
I mean, the only thing I'll say about bullets is that there may be some points where you want to reinforce with a few keywords, a bullet with 2 or 3 words, but the less of that, the better. Presenting should be a human experience and it should be a visual experience. If you want people to read, you can print it out and hand it to them. With presenting, it's basically show the pictures, say the words, and for heavy-duty data transmission, you can always hand them paper.
Okay, can I give you a couple more really quick?
Sure, keep going. I've got some time here.
Yeah,
keep going.
Good. Somebody asked about, do you prefer justified right or left or center? And again, another quick one. How do you feel about Prezi, and does the B key work on Prezi as well?
Well, so to the first question, I'm not going to give you design principles, justified right, left, or center. generally, whatever makes things, if you want people to read off the screen, whatever makes things the most readable for your audience, do that. It's all about the audience. And generally, flush left tends to do it. That's how people read most things. When you have type that is justified right or centered, you either have a ragged left, or the eye has trouble tracking back and forth. So just think about how people read information and just give it to them as easily as possible. As far as Prezi goes, I'm not a fan. I think Prezi is kind of a one-trick pony. If part of your message is this notion of sort of jumping out and jumping in, jumping out and jumping in, seeing a broad perspective and then going into depth, that's what Prezi does, and it does it beautifully. But that's basically all it does. And so I would say, unless that's absolutely essential to what you're saying, then I think PowerPoint or Keynote are much more graphically rich applications to work with. And I do not know if the B key works for Prezi.
Okay, two quick last ones. Somebody asked about, do you allow people to take pictures of slides as you're presenting, even if you own the images? That's one. And the second one was, are you going to review these tips? Somebody missed number 3. So
well, let's see. Hold on one second. I was not planning on going back. However, as you know, everyone's going to get a copy of this book, Why Bad Presentations, and all this information is in there and more. So anything you missed, believe me, it's in the book. So that's coming your way. And sorry, what was the other question again?
And the other question is, do you let people take photos of your slides, even, while you're giving a presentation, even if you own the images? Somebody was concerned that people don't allow that and was just asking your advice on that.
I'm fairly liberal where that's concerned. In most of my presentations, I am either providing the slides as a PDF afterwards, or if it's based on a book like this, I don't provide the slides, but I say, you're going to get the book, so you're getting it all anyway. So, sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Yeah. That's great, Andy. Kristen, did I miss anything?
That looks like all of them to me.
We've had great questions, Andy, and great comments, and people have been answering each other's questions, so it's been fantastic.
Good. Well, then let me do a little bit of housekeeping, and then let me follow my own rule, which is not to end with Q&A, but to leave you with a closing thought. So let me see if I've got this correct here. There we go. If you want to go a little deeper on your own, first of all, some books just about the art of speaking. On Speaking Well by Peggy Noonan. She was a former speechwriter for Ronald Reagan. Even if you disagree with her politics, which I do, there's good advice in the book. If you're a nervous speaker, Lillian Wilder's 7 Steps to Fearless Speaking has wonderful tips to help you be less nervous in the front of the room. And Max Atkinson is a very witty Brit. He wrote Lend Me Your Ears. It's just a good overall book about presentation skills. If you're designing your own presentations, Presentation Zen Design by Gar Reynolds, excellent design tips there. I mentioned Nancy Duarte earlier. Slideology is a wonderful book about slide design. Cliff Atkinson's Beyond Bullet Points. Like me, Cliff is not a fan of bullet points, so how to do a presentation where the entire presentation tells a story. This PDF will be coming to you from NAAE. Again, a lot of what we talked about is in here, but so much more. So I hope you'll spend some time reading that. And an online resource I can highly recommend, go to this website, speaking.alltop.com. This is an aggregator of links to other websites about public speaking, presentation design, PowerPoint, and more. If you're looking for good free advice on the web, this is a good place to start. I want to say a big thank you to Judy for inviting me and to Kristen for helping set up this technology. This works so smoothly. It's a pleasure to work with you. And now, last thought before I throw it back to Judy and say goodbye. I'm sure you're familiar with the concept of the tipping point that Malcolm Gladwell wrote about. Before it was a book, there was actually an article in the New Yorker about how police in the New York area used the theory of the tipping point to cut down on crime. They went to the precursors of serious crime, minor crime like graffiti. When they saw it, they would paint it over right away. Kids jumping over turnstiles in subways, not a big deal, but they would crack down on that with the idea being that we're not going to let this minor crime, tip to more serious crime. This was a very effective police strategy for a number of years. The reason I end with this is because when I see bad presentations in our sector, to me, this is minor communications crime. No one's dying, no one's getting hurt. But if we don't nip it in the bud, then I think it can tip to a more serious problem, because every bad presentation, it's a waste of our time for the people in the audience. It's a waste of an opportunity for the presenter. I really do think we need to nip this in the bud. So here's what I ask you to do after today. 2 things. 1, when you get a copy of the book, read it. Hold yourself to a higher standard. I don't believe everybody's cut out to be a great presenter, but I believe that everybody can get better right away by doing certain things and stop doing other things. So read the book, hold yourself to a higher standard. But also, hold others to a higher standard as well. If you go to a presentation and there's an evaluation form, you attend a webinar like this, there's an evaluation form, take the time to fill it out. If it was less than the best use of your time, let them know. If you hold yourself to a higher standard and hold others to a higher standard, then all of us together, I truly believe, we can end boredom in our lifetimes. Thank you very much.
Andy, thank you so much. That was fantastic. And I think you've got a lot of followers. And I know that everybody that goes to any presentations is very thankful for what you are doing and how you've helped us all. So thank you again. You've done so much for our organization and for all of our team personally. And I hope that everybody on this webinar also gained a lot of insights, and they can tell a lot of you have. I'm turning it back over to Kristen to wrap this up and get you ready for our next webinar. But thank you again, Andy.
My pleasure.
Thanks, Judy. Just a couple of housekeeping things before we sign off. We do encourage you to go to EE Pro if you want to continue this discussion any further. The discussion forums in the EE Central group is a great place to continue this conversation. We'll be sending instructions for how to get started using EE Pro in a follow-up email that you will receive tomorrow. It's easy and it's free, so we hope to see you there. And just to reiterate, we will post a recording of part 1 and part 2 of Andy's webinar on EE Pro. The recording will be posted as an archived webinar under the Learning tab. We'll also send a link to each of these recordings to anyone who registered, as well as a link to download a PDF version of Andy's book, Why Bad Presentations Happen to Good Causes. That will come in the follow-up email you'll receive tomorrow. And just as a reminder to stay tuned for next month's webinar, mark your calendars for Tuesday, April 25th, when Dr. Ellen Kelsey, a recognized leader in creating communication strategies that engage communities in sustainability and conservation issues, will present Wild Contagious Hope. She'll focus on eliciting hope in the environmental movement, which is, I think, something all of us can use. Just as a reminder, we do plan to host webinars on the 4th Tuesday of every month, and we would love to hear from you about what you'd like to learn in future webinars. So please do reach out to us if you have ideas for future topics and speakers. And if you have a quick minute to take our 5-minute survey, we'd love to get your feedback on the webinar series and your ideas for future speakers. We'll send the link to that survey in your follow-up email, as well as post a link to it in the chat box if you have a minute now. And thank you again for joining us. Thanks to Andy for being a living demonstration of how we can all give better presentations.
Thanks, everyone.